The vast, beautifully dry Australian outback was absolutely never truly completely empty during this deeply magnificent prehistoric epoch. Something incredibly large silently crossed the vast red landscape, completely casting one spectacularly massive, deeply terrifying dark shadow. Long before this magnificently terrifying prehistoric predator physically appeared, the vibrating dry earth instantly felt its heavy approach. For smaller, terrified marsupial animals, completely unexpected deadly danger would constantly arrive quietly within this dense ancient brush. The incredibly intense, deeply sweltering Australian heat haze brilliantly concealed the absolute greatest terrestrial lizard hunter ever known. Moving gracefully past tall eucalyptus trees, only terrifying biological fragments of this spectacularly massive creature were clearly visible. Its profoundly immense, incredibly powerful physical size was absolutely completely difficult for early ancient mammalian minds to understand. Weighing over 1,000 pounds, this spectacularly gigantic, deeply terrifying venomous lizard absolutely ruled completely over prehistoric Australia. Dragging heavily through deep red dirt, its completely massive, incredibly sharp reptilian claws left deeply permanent environmental marks. Perfectly framed against glowing evening skies, the wild Australian outback beautifully possessed its very own spectacular prehistoric dragon. Absolutely very few native biological animals could safely ignore this profoundly massive, deeply relentless, ancient terrestrial reptilian king. Staring intensely through swirling desert dust, one spectacularly magnificent, highly specialized prehistoric biological predator was slowly, beautifully revealed. Walking gracefully across endless golden horizons, this incredibly giant monitor successfully represented the ultimate absolute ancient biological survivor. But its deeply familiar, wonderfully balanced ancient Australian terrestrial world was suddenly tragically changing completely, fundamentally, violently forever. And eventually this spectacularly terrifying, completely magnificent prehistoric Australian dragon would tragically disappear into absolute permanent silent prehistory. Long before human footprints ever actually marked the red earth, prehistoric Australia beautifully remained one completely untouched ecosystem. During the spectacular Pleistocene epoch, incredibly massive herds of beautiful giant marsupials wandered peacefully across these vast plains. Dense, wonderfully aromatic ancient eucalyptus forests successfully flourished, brilliantly providing perfect natural shelter for incredibly diverse biological communities. Gigantic 2-ton diprotodons gracefully approached these beautifully cool ancient riverbanks, peacefully drinking alongside absolutely completely spectacular wildlife. Enormous short-faced kangaroos and giant flightless birds successfully shared this beautifully rich, absolutely perfectly balanced prehistoric environment. However, beneath this remarkably peaceful golden surface, deeply terrifying carnivorous predators continuously hid quietly within the tall grasses. Fierce, violently unpredictable outback dust storms occasionally swept across the open plains, dramatically shaping this deeply unforgiving landscape. Vast ancient river systems brilliantly sliced right through the vibrant red earth, successfully sustaining incredibly rich biological biodiversity. Towering above modern equivalents, massively powerful prehistoric kangaroos effortlessly bounded across completely open, wonderfully sunlit, ancient Australian territories. From deeply shadowed ancient caves heavily armored terrestrial crocodiles and fierce marsupial lions patiently observed their magnificent kingdom. Intense, sweltering heat violently baked these endless grassy expanses, perfectly forging absolutely unyielding, incredibly tough terrestrial biological survivors. Life successfully adapted beautifully everywhere, perfectly utilizing dense woodland canopies toward escaping the punishing, relentlessly hot Australian sun. Even beneath incredibly hot desert stones, tiny resilient creatures miraculously thrived alongside spectacular giants dominating the vast plains. Every glorious golden evening, this beautifully undisturbed Pleistocene world proudly displayed its completely unrivaled, deeply magnificent mammalian megafauna. Tranquil ancient rivers smoothly reflected glowing twilight skies, perfectly sustaining the absolute greatest biological diversity Australia ever experienced. But gracefully commanding this entire spectacular prehistoric kingdom was one deeply terrifying, completely unrivaled giant terrestrial reptilian sovereign. The beautifully unforgiving ancient Australian outback successfully provided the absolutely perfect ecological stage for an incredibly massive predator. This remarkably complex, wonderfully balanced ancient biological terrestrial world brilliantly birthed the absolute ultimate prehistoric venomous monitor lizard. Millions of continuous prehistoric years ago, the beautifully isolated Australian continent slowly drifted completely across vast ancient oceans. Early primitive monitor lizards successfully migrated toward this deeply fascinating new terrestrial world before absolute continental separation finalized. Within this spectacularly unique environment, these highly adaptable ancient reptilian predators beautifully began one deeply profound, remarkable transformation. As beautifully dense ancient rainforests systematically transformed into extremely dry, expansive grasslands, completely incredible biological evolutionary shifts occurred. Sharing their pristine habitat alongside incredibly fierce prehistoric marsupial lions, these ambitious monitor lizards aggressively expanded vast territories. Generation after consecutive generation, the brilliantly successful Varanid family gradually attained absolutely spectacular, previously completely unimaginable physical proportions. Fascinatingly, the deeply iconic modern Komodo dragon actually originally successfully evolved within these exact same ancient Australian landscapes. While those smaller relatives eventually migrated northward towards Indonesia, another beautifully terrifying spectacular giant permanently remained exclusively behind. Unlike slender living descendants, this magnificently robust prehistoric creature beautifully maintained completely incredibly massive skeletal proportions throughout adulthood. Perfectly exploiting deep environmental, continental isolation, relentless biological evolution successfully produced something absolutely completely unprecedented across global prehistory. Stretching magnificently beyond 18 massive feet, this spectacularly powerful apex terrestrial reptilian predator completely flawlessly mastered ancient Australia. The absolutely magnificent first true Australian dragon had officially majestically finally arrived, perfectly prepared toward dominating its kingdom. Its closest living modern biological relatives successfully survive today, beautifully representing incredibly dangerous, highly adaptable terrestrial monitor lizards. However, this spectacularly massive prehistoric Australian creature was absolutely far larger than any completely familiar modern living descendant. Reaching lengths exceeding 20 magnificent feet, this deeply terrifying reptile represented the absolute largest terrestrial squamate known globally. Initially named Megalania by Richard Owen, this beautiful taxonomic title literally translates into the magnificent ancient great roamer. Despite frequently being incorrectly translated as giant butcher, this completely magnificent creature was actually a true varanid lizard. Modern scientists correctly classify this deeply intimidating prehistoric beast as Varanus priscus, perfectly embedding it within living lineages. Unlike slender modern goannas, its spectacularly robust skeletal frame beautifully supported massive weights approaching over 1,000 pounds. This incredibly vast biological size completely demanded profoundly unique physical structural adaptations throughout its entirely magnificent reptilian body. Standing victoriously upon sunlit rocky ridges, it perfectly represented the absolute undisputed apex terrestrial predator across prehistoric Australia. It was absolutely no mythical dinosaur, but rather something completely equally extraordinary, entirely dominating our beautiful prehistoric world. To completely understand this magnificently powerful ancient reptilian king, we must deeply examine its incredibly specialized physical anatomy. Unlike slender modern monitors, its spectacularly robust skeletal frame beautifully supported massive weights approaching over 1,000 pounds. Its incredibly thick, heavily built humerus bones systematically provided absolutely completely unmatched terrestrial stability across harsh Australian landscapes. Determinate biological growth perfectly ensured these magnificently heavy, widely proportioned physical dimensions remained wonderfully constant throughout its adulthood. Beneath its deeply rugged reptilian hide, specialized bony osteoderms brilliantly functioned exactly like perfectly interlocking protective chainmail. These deeply crucial dermal armors flawlessly shielded its magnificent head during intensely violent, highly aggressive, competitive intraspecific combat. Its enormous, beautifully massive skull elegantly featured one subtly raised bony crest resting gracefully between deeply alert eyes. Lacking highly advanced auditory perception, this relentless predator systematically relied upon its incredibly sensitive, deeply forked yellow tongue. This spectacularly sophisticated sensory organ flawlessly detected distant biological scents, perfectly guiding the terrifying beast toward unsuspecting prey. Utilizing highly effective, beautifully calculated ambush strategies, the giant lizard remained completely hidden within dense ancient Australian vegetation. Although moving relatively slowly, its spectacular short sprinting bursts successfully guaranteed absolutely devastating, completely unavoidable, sudden predatory impacts. Because its jaw bite pressure remained surprisingly weak, this magnificent predator brilliantly utilized deeply sophisticated flesh-slicing techniques. Its incredibly lethal, completely terrifying ziphodont teeth featured jagged serrations beautifully reinforced through highly specialized metallic iron coatings. Combined with beautifully folded wrinkled enamel, these spectacular teeth flawlessly endured immense mechanical stress during violently chaotic struggles. However, its absolute greatest predatory biological weapon beautifully resided completely hidden deep inside its incredibly massive lower jawbone. Complex mandibular glands systematically secreted highly toxic biological hemotoxins, perfectly triggering profound systemic shock within its struggling victims. This spectacular venomous delivery system successfully established Megalania as prehistory's absolute largest, completely undeniable venomous terrestrial vertebrate predator. Combining raw muscular power alongside deeply lethal chemical biology perfectly created ancient Australia's absolute ultimate reptilian evolutionary masterpiece. Every single spectacular prehistoric morning systematically began with this magnificently massive giant actively patrolling its vast Australian kingdom. Because it remained entirely cold-blooded, this deeply terrifying predator absolutely required intense morning sunlight for essential energy. Its incredibly slow biological metabolism beautifully allowed this spectacular lizard to survive perfectly upon significantly fewer nutritional meals. Wandering effortlessly across massive distances, the magnificent ancient great roamer successfully commanded completely undisputed dominance throughout Pleistocene Australia. Frequent territorial disputes between exceptionally aggressive, massive males naturally guaranteed completely spectacular, highly violent physical combat over resources. Towering short-faced kangaroos constantly remain incredibly vigilant whenever this remarkably dangerous prehistoric venomous shadow gracefully approached them. Instead of actively pursuing extremely fast prey, it brilliantly utilized dense vegetation for completely terrifying, highly effective ambushes. Flawlessly camouflaged within tall, dry grasses, this deeply patient prehistoric monster silently waited for completely unaware, wandering mammals. A sophisticated forked tongue gracefully flickered outward, brilliantly locating distant biological scents across absolutely massive open desert landscapes. Enormous rhinoceros-sized diprotodons represented highly lucrative targets for this spectacularly powerful, perfectly engineered ancient terrestrial reptilian hunter. Though relatively slow across long distances, short explosive sprinting bursts successfully guaranteed absolutely devastating, completely unavoidable sudden impacts. It frequently shared these wonderfully tranquil ancient rivers with entirely terrifying prehistoric terrestrial crocodiles known perfectly as quinkana. Sharing territories alongside fierce marsupial lions absolutely forced this giant lizard toward remaining incredibly aggressive during competitive scavenging. Because it was remarkably huge, Megalania completely effortlessly stole fresh carcasses from significantly smaller, deeply frustrated ancient predators. After successfully securing massive kills, the spectacularly ruthless hunter completely consumed enormous meat chunks, utilizing incredibly powerful jaws. Amazingly, this spectacular lizard could efficiently consume nearly 80% of its total body weight during one meal. Following completely massive, highly successful feeding events, it retreated quietly into dense vegetation for essentially necessary extended digestion. Highly specialized stomach acids flawlessly dissolve tough biological materials including heavy bones, thick skins, and remarkably sharp claws. Incredibly rare fossil evidence suggests that extremely hungry adults occasionally ruthlessly cannibalized smaller, deeply vulnerable juvenile monitor lizards. By carefully actively avoiding dangerous adults, young Megalania instinctively inhabited tall ancient trees until reaching completely massive proportions. When finally fully matured, this spectacularly terrifying terrestrial dragon possessed absolutely zero natural predators across vast Australian landscapes. Its perfectly adapted cold-blooded physiology brilliantly thrived amidst extremely harsh, deeply unforgiving, prehistoric Australian environmental drought conditions. As beautiful golden evening shadows stretched endlessly, This magnificent ancient reptilian king systematically secured its highly coveted territory, slowly fading silently into deep darkening eucalyptus forests. The giant beautifully prepared for absolutely another spectacular hunting tomorrow. Undisputedly reigning completely supreme, Megalania flawlessly maintained beautiful ecological balance throughout incredibly ancient Australian Pleistocene mammalian biological communities. This spectacularly majestic reptilian dynasty continued peacefully across millions of profoundly beautiful, completely uninterrupted ancient prehistoric evolutionary years. Every glorious prehistoric sunset perfectly celebrated this completely unrivaled, deeply magnificent giant terrestrial varanid lizard dominating its realm. However, profoundly devastating massive global environmental changes silently approach this wonderfully beautiful, flawlessly balanced ancient Australian biological kingdom. Around 40,000 prehistoric years ago, the beautifully balanced ancient Australian ecosystem systematically began changing completely, irrevocably, forever. Once wonderfully abundant prehistoric freshwater river systems completely tragically transformed into profoundly barren, deeply cracked dry terrestrial landscapes. Relentless environmental aridity rapidly expanded absolutely everywhere, frequently sweeping intensely violent outback dust storms completely across former woodlands. This spectacularly massive terrestrial lizard desperately required extremely vast, beautifully rich ancient ecological territories for successful daily survival. As extreme drought destroyed vital ancient vegetation, enormous herbivorous marsupial prey populations unexpectedly suffered profoundly devastating biological collapses. Without sufficient large mammalian prey resources available anywhere, the magnificent venomous dragon tragically faced absolutely overwhelming environmental starvation. Wandering continuously across increasingly desolate red plains, this incredibly exhausted, magnificent prehistoric giant desperately searched for disappearing nourishment. Its incredibly slow biological reproductive rate completely perfectly prevented any successful population recovery during these rapidly deteriorating times. Spectacular predatory adaptations previously ensuring total absolute dominance unexpectedly became incredibly fatal physical evolutionary liabilities during severe drought. The once perfectly balanced, beautifully rich ancient Pleistocene wilderness systematically surrendered toward completely unforgiving, deeply barren environmental desolation. This spectacularly massive, deeply specialized apex prehistoric predator simply could not successfully adapt alongside its profoundly fading ecosystem. Absolutely everything this magnificent venomous king deeply depended upon was now completely tragically disappearing beneath blowing red dust. Around 65,000 years ago, an entirely new, incredibly adaptable mammalian biological species successfully entered prehistoric Australia. For the absolute first time ever, this magnificently terrifying giant terrestrial monitor lizard was tragically not completely alone. These highly intelligent new human predators systematically introduced controlled burning, profoundly altering the beautifully wild ancient Australian landscape. Watching quietly from dense prehistoric vegetation, the spectacular, venomous dragon carefully observed its incredibly resourceful, new biological competitors. These ancient Aboriginal human settlers deliberately systematically transformed their newly discovered environment through deeply sophisticated land management practices. Intentional firestick farming rapidly aggressively consumed vast ancient eucalyptus forests, permanently removing essential predatory ambush concealment vegetation. Previously lush, beautifully dense, prehistoric Australian habitats suddenly became profoundly barren, completely exposed, and heavily charred terrestrial landscapes. Without sufficient natural vegetation remaining, enormous native herbivorous marsupial prey populations quickly desperately migrated towards safer, untouched territories. This incredibly massive, deeply specialized apex prehistoric reptilian predator tragically found its previously perfect hunting kingdom dramatically shrinking. The deeply familiar, wonderfully balanced ancient Australian terrestrial world now felt absolutely completely alien, incredibly unpredictable, increasingly dangerous. Deprived of dense forest cover, this spectacularly slow ambush hunter severely struggled successfully catching increasingly scarce mammalian prey. Two incredibly dangerous, highly capable apex biological predators temporarily shared this deeply changing, increasingly dry prehistoric Australian continent. However, absolutely only one superbly adaptable terrestrial biological lineage would successfully permanently survive these profoundly massive ecological transformations. Unrelenting natural climate shifts systematically amplified these devastating environmental pressures, violently accelerating widespread ancient Australian Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions. The spectacular giant terrestrial lizard absolutely required massive prey quantities completely unavailable within these heavily burned new environments. Because Megalania possessed incredibly slow biological reproductive rates, its fading prehistoric population simply could not successfully, rapidly recover. Wandering through violently altered, profoundly empty outback territories, the magnificently terrifying first Australian dragon tragically became increasingly desperate. It brilliantly survived absolutely devastating prehistoric droughts and deep continental isolation across millions of completely uninterrupted evolutionary years. But this completely unprecedented, rapidly changing, human-dominated new landscape presented an absolutely impossible, thoroughly fatal ecological challenge. There was absolutely no spectacular final violent battle completely defeating this magnificently powerful ancient Australian terrestrial reptilian king. Instead, its deeply essential, beautifully balanced ancient biological ecosystem support system silently systematically collapsed completely underneath its feet. Human hunting effectively eliminated remaining giant marsupial herbivores, permanently tragically starving the remarkably massive, beautifully specialized venomous predator. Starving and utterly exhausted, these spectacular terrestrial giants silently drifted through beautifully indifferent, dramatically shifting ancient Australian environments. Without dense woodland concealment or sufficient massive prey, its previously legendary terrifying evolutionary dominance was systematically completely eclipsed. The fiercely majestic Megalania slowly surrendered its undisputed outback throne to highly adaptable, incredibly brilliant ancient human newcomers. Relentless evolution absolutely demands continuous biological adaptation, punishing any magnificent ancient creature tragically unable to successfully, permanently change. The absolute final Pleistocene sunset tragically marked the permanent biological evolutionary conclusion for this spectacularly massive Australian leviathan. Ultimately, this completely unprecedented ecological transformation flawlessly succeeded in permanently pushing Australia's magnificent dragon into absolute silent prehistory. The beautifully vast ancient Australian outback completely remained, stretching endlessly across profoundly spectacular, deeply sunlit golden prehistoric horizons. However, something absolutely fundamental was completely tragically missing from these once incredibly vibrant, wonderfully diverse Pleistocene terrestrial environments. This spectacularly massive, incredibly powerful, venomous ancient lizard had suddenly become profoundly, tragically rare across its fading kingdom. Wandering completely alone through violently shifting ancient Australian landscapes, the incredibly exhausted king found absolute survival profoundly difficult. Beautifully essential ancient prehistoric waterways tragically vanished completely, leaving behind profoundly cracked, intensely baked, barren red dirt valleys. Without absolutely any abundant, massive marsupial prey available anywhere, the spectacularly terrifying dragon slowly starved amidst desolate plains. Violent, unrelenting outback winds aggressively carried thick red dust, permanently burying this magnificently powerful reptilian predator's former paradise. Exhausted surviving individuals desperately searched endlessly around completely dried mud pools, sadly finding absolutely nothing sustaining their existence. The previously thunderous, highly active ancient Australian ecosystem suddenly became profoundly, beautifully, completely peacefully quiet without giant herbivores. Looking quietly across one increasingly silent landscape, the magnificently powerful ancient apex predator tragically accepted its inevitable conclusion. Absolutely no spectacular final violent biological battle completely defeated this incredibly massive, beautifully terrifying ancient terrestrial reptilian king. Instead, unrelenting geological time and profoundly shifting environmental conditions silently, effectively crushed completely prehistory's absolute greatest venomous masterpiece. Undertaking one beautifully silent, completely final exhausted physical journey, this spectacularly massive creature quietly accepted its evolutionary fate. Standing absolutely beautifully empty beneath fading crimson twilight, the deeply relentless prehistoric landscape finally completely defeated the dragon. Its incredibly massive, deeply powerful, familiar prehistoric silhouette slowly disappeared completely into deep, dark, ancient global environmental shadows. Relentless evolutionary progress aggressively pushed continuously forward, tragically leaving the perfectly adapted ancient Pleistocene biological masterpiece entirely behind. Without leaving any direct biological descendant species, this spectacularly massive prehistoric genus tragically suffered complete permanent evolutionary extinction. The beautifully vast, deeply familiar ancient terrestrial territories were completely peacefully reclaimed by entirely natural shifting ecological forces. A profoundly new dawn broke peacefully over utterly empty red plains, beautifully signaling an absolutely silent evolutionary transition. Incredibly brilliant, highly sophisticated modern mammalian human descendants would soon brilliantly rise across these profoundly dry terrestrial environments. Yet absolutely no subsequent land-dwelling biological species would ever successfully replicate this magnificent monitor lizard's sheer majesty. Stretching endlessly beneath an emotionally beautiful, profoundly darkening ancient sky, the magnificent age of Megalania completely permanently concluded. Beautiful new biological terrestrial species peacefully inherited our vastly dynamic, incredibly complex, constantly evolving global dry outback environments. But the spectacularly magnificent, deeply tragic, ultimate reptilian king completely vanished from physical existence, absolutely entirely peacefully forever. Around exactly 50,000 years ago, this spectacularly massive ancient biological predator tragically took his complete final breath. The deeply terrifying prehistoric dragon beautifully, peacefully returned its physical form directly back into the ancient red earth, leaving behind absolutely zero biological survivors. The magnificent Varanus priscus completely surrendered its undisputed crown absolutely entirely forever. Its beautifully tragic disappearance permanently reminds us that incredibly profound environmental climate changes ultimately conquer absolutely everything eventually. Today, spectacularly massive fossilized fragments beautifully peacefully rest absolutely entirely hidden beneath deeply red modern Australian desert sands. Patiently excavated prehistoric varanid bones successfully perfectly reveal completely incredible biological truths surrounding this deeply terrifying ancient predator. Standing magnificently inside quiet modern museums, this spectacularly massive skeletal reconstruction continuously brilliantly inspires absolute human scientific wonder. Spanning over 20 incredible feet, these spectacularly massive fossilized bones perfectly showcase an absolutely unrivaled prehistoric reptilian supremacy. Although Megalania tragically vanished completely forever, its beautifully magnificent, incredibly dangerous genetic legacy successfully survives within modern relatives. Sharing profound ancient evolutionary roots, the spectacular living Komodo dragon beautifully reflects its incredibly massive, deeply terrifying ancestor. Incredibly ancient Aboriginal oral traditions successfully beautifully preserved deep tribal memories featuring this spectacularly massive reptilian prehistoric monster. Remembered beautifully as the legendary Howie, this profoundly terrifying prehistoric creature perfectly achieved completely absolute timeless cultural immortality. Its deeply unforgiving ancient Pleistocene environment disappeared completely forever, yet its spectacularly fascinating evolutionary legacy powerfully peacefully continues. We must permanently remember Megalania absolutely not as some terrifying dinosaur, but beautifully representing one flawlessly adaptable king. It beautifully represented one spectacularly massive, profoundly relentless ancient survivor, completely dominating an incredibly rich, perfectly balanced kingdom. Its beautifully tragic fossilized legacy permanently reminds us that incredibly profound environmental climate changes ultimately conquer absolutely everything. Wandering endlessly through our collective human imagination, the spectacular first Australian dragon peacefully maintains completely absolute prehistoric immortality.